Hello and welcome, fellow Shadow Priests. I'm Dark from Darkest TV, and today we have a request video for those of you wondering about the lovely world of snapshotting. First, a quick thank you to Weston Wright for posing this doozy of a question on my last video regarding Ulduar Bis. And second, if you get any value from this video, consider leaving a like and smashing the subscribe button. Alright, with all that said, let's get started. First dot we're going to take a look at today is Shadow Word Pain. The basic stats that apply to Shadow Word Pain are % damage modifiers and % crit modifiers. % crit modifiers would be something like Focus Magic, Boomkin Aura, those sorts of things. % damage modifiers would be things like the runes on the ground from Iron Council or the mushrooms on Freya. I'm going to do a quick baseline Shadow Word Pain for you to show you the baseline of Shadow Word Pain without applying any fancy buffs to it. So, you'll note that Shadow Word Pain ticks every 3 seconds-ish. It's like 2.98 to 3.01, right? It's very tight. And the base damage is relatively low without applying % damage modifiers. However, when we apply % damage modifiers, we will see that its baseline is slightly increased. So, we're going to get our Shadow Weaving stacks, drop our spell power buffs, and just apply Shadow Word Pain to show you the baseline values. So now, the baseline value of Shadow Word Pain will have this 10% Shadow Weaving buff. It is a % spell power buff. It'll apply baseline to the spell. If you were to apply Shadow Word Pain on pull, for example, it would go up with your spell power buffs and things like that, which I'll explain in a moment, but it will not have the 10% base spell damage that you applied from having Shadow Word Pain at 5 stacks. Now, we're going to do that again, but you're going to see that when I get trinket procs and things like that, the dot's damage will ebb and flow. So we have a trinket proc right now, so pay attention to the base damage of it as it ticks. So like 1.3 with that up, and now we've got our shadow, Glyph of Shadow, we've got our cloak buff, we've got all those things rolling, and that's applying every time I refresh. So when I stop refreshing, if those fall off, which hopefully they don't, I will have the same value once I stop mind flaying. So once I stop mind flaying and I've had Glyph of Shadow up, it'll keep the same value that it had. But once I refresh without Glyph of Shadow, but still with Shadow Weaving, it doesn't matter at this point if Shadow Weaving's up or not, it will then refresh the dot at the lower spell power value, so the average dot damage will decrease without that spell power. However, when it procs again, like this, and I reapply Shadow Word Pain via Mind Flay, that shadow damage is now applied again to the Shadow Word Pain. So that is how Shadow Word Pain snapshotting works. It's increased, remember, with % damage and % crit. So like the rune on Iron Council is a great example of a massive % damage increase. So when you have that rune, applying Shadow Word Pain to your target with that rune active will apply that base damage. We'll go over these in a future VOD review video of those fights. So what I'm going to be doing is releasing a series of VOD review on myself and log review and things like that to show you in real time better ways of doing rotations on bosses and what I'm doing currently to get big parses. I have several 99s and I'm excited to share those clips with you to show you what I did to make that happen. So if that's also something that interests you, I would definitely consider subscribing to this channel because I'm going to be uploading those throughout the coming weeks, maybe 2 to 3 per week, assuming I can fit them into my schedule. So that's my intention and my plan. Now, we're going to look at Vampiric Embrace and Devouring Plague. What is first and foremost the most important part of Vampiric Touch and Devouring Plague is that upon application, whatever stat buffs you have at the time, % damage, % crit, haste, and spell power you have applied at the time of casting that dot is what will go into that dot, right? So if you have Lust, you have your damage potion, you have, say, a trinket. If you have an unused trinket, you have engineering gloves if you're an engineer. Any spell power buff, haste buff, crit buff will all apply to that dot upon cast. This also includes Shadow Weaving. So you need to have 5 stacks of Shadow Weaving when you cast your Vampiric Touch. So we have 5. We're going to cast it with 5 stacks of Shadow Weaving with a Glyph of Shadow proc. So you'll note that where it's at right now, it's procking or hitting for about 1.6 to 1.8, right? And the duration was 12 seconds. So at 12 seconds, it was ticking every 2.5 seconds, right? Now we're going to apply haste buffs to this. So we're going to hit our Mind Flay. We're going to get our Shadow Weaving up. Don't care if a trinket procs, because that's not what's important right now. We're going to use our gloves, engineering gloves, our haste potion or potion of speed, and then we're going to use our Scale of Fates, which, by the way, I'm very lucky to have. 9 seconds, 8.5 seconds duration, and now it's ticking with that damage modifier, haste modifier, everything, about 1.9 seconds. Every 1.9 seconds, it places a tick, right? So notice it went from 2.5 seconds, duration of 12 seconds, to 1.9 seconds, duration of 8.5, 9-ish seconds, right? Same amount of ticks happened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They just came a lot faster, right? And that's important to note because you're looking at getting the most DPS possible, and DPS is damage per second for those of you who might not know. The other thing to note is that Devouring Plague works the exact same way, right? So at baseline, it procced 19 seconds duration. It's ticking every 2.5 seconds on the timer. Now, once we apply haste buffs to this, it'll actually tick the exact same speed as Vampiric Touch, or within a fraction of a second speed as Vampiric Touch. So that also goes into our DPS, damage per second profile, right? So give me a second. I'll come back to you just a moment once my Scale of Fate's up so I can show you Devouring Plague with the haste buff. Okay, we're back. Devouring Plague is what we're looking at, and we've got our Scale of Fates up with our speed buffs, so we're going to go ahead and show you the duration on that. Alright, with haste buffs up, it's 14 seconds, and again, we're looking at ticking roughly every 1.9 seconds, right? So it's the exact same tick speed as Vampiric Touch if placed at the same haste value. So that's incredibly powerful, right? So you're looking at the same amount of dot ticks again, but faster tick speed. Okay, so the part B of the question for when to snapshot these dots. So snapshotting around Lust is incredibly valuable. Haste is arguably the most important stat to re-snapshot around. Ideally, you're doing this around specifically Lust, because trinkets and stuff have less value. You're only getting so much stat out of it. So like Scale of Fates is really close. However, it's 457 haste baseline. So that's something to consider snapshotting around. It's going to take definitely more playtesting because I just got this thing for me to actually wholeheartedly figure out for myself exactly what it is. I personally would err on the side of don't stop mind flaying unless you have Lust up, right? So Lust is an incredibly valuable one if you have all spell power buffs up, all of them. So like Cloak proc, trinkets, like damage trinkets, potion, all those things. If you have max spell damage increase, then I would make an argument also for re-snapshotting. So let's just start with this. So we're going to Vampiric Touch off opener. We're going to sit here until we get trinket procs. We got a cloak proc, trinket procs, everything's up. So we're going to recast it and we're going to look at the base damage gained. So we went from an average of 1.3-ish ticks to 2.12-ish. That's where there's a lot of value in losing 2 ticks for a refresh on it, right? So you have so much extra spell power that it's actually valuable to refresh the dot. So this leads into the next topic is when do I stop channeling Mind Flay to refresh a dot for a snapshot, right? That's actually when you have a lot of spell power and or a lot of haste. So like Lust is 2 seconds from falling off, get those dots refreshed. right? So if they're down to like the 5-second duration or 5 to 3 seconds, and lust is about to fall off, get lusted or get that lusted buff back on, right? You want to max out the lusted buff. It doesn't matter the spell power as much. If you're losing a ton of spell power and lust is about to fall off, then it's going to be a little bit harder of an argument to make to lose 2 extra ticks, possibly. But general policy would be, if lust is about to fall off, just always reapply the dot. That's the basic principle, okay? Break your mind flay 2 ticks if you have to, in order to recast dots before lust falls off, or massive spell powers all up, all that kind of stuff, right? Okay, so that touches on all of it. I really appreciate you checking this video out. If you got value out of it, remember to leave a like on the video to get this out to more people. If you want to see the Shadow Priest POVs in which I break down each fight and talk about when to do certain things or why I'm doing certain things when I'm doing them, please consider hitting subscribe. Keep an eye out for those videos. And if you're interested in in-depth discussion on this, you can always check out the Shadow Priest Discord. You can search Snapshotting in the Theory Crafting channel and or the general channel. You'll get a lot of discussion on snapshotting. They talk about it endlessly. There are a couple of like breakdown charts and things like that in there. So check out the Shadow Priest Discord. And that's it. Until next time, folks, farewell.